and welcome to Logan Sounds Off, where I talk about books, music, and a whole lot more. I'm your host, Logan Kelly. Hello and welcome to Logan Sounds Off. Today I'm talking to one of the most inspirational punk musicians, as well as being an actor, comedian, and solo spoken word artist, Henry Rollins. Henry, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, man?
I am brilliant. So, for those who don't know you or aren't aware with Black Flag and the many different things that you've been in, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Born in Washington, D.C. in February of 1961. And so I'll be staggering into age 63 in a few days. I lived in Washington, D.C. until I was 20. And then I moved all the way across the country to Los Angeles, California to join a band called Black Flag. And that was 1981 to 1986. By 1987, I had my own band, Rollins Band, and we made records and played all over the world for many years. And then in the middle of all of that, by 1983, I was doing shows by myself, just on stage alone. And I continue to do those shows. I just wrapped up a tour of 2 years, 261 shows, 28 countries. Started a publishing company for books in around that year, 1983. And since I publish myself, there's no rejection slips, so I can just write a book and put it out. So I'm not saying they're any good. I'm just saying I keep doing it. And so also I started appearing in film roles, TV, voiceover work, radio work, film, just trying to keep things interesting and just do a lot of different things. I come from the minimum wage working world. And so I come from $3.75 an hour, doing kind of mind-numbing, repetitive tasks. And so one of the reasons I tried to do so many different things is just I don't think I'm qualified to do any of it. And so why not give everything a try? Because I shouldn't be here at any of them anyway. And so I'm not trying to give anyone the impression that I think I'm any good. Hopefully people will understand I'm just trying to get away with it a lot of the time.
That is just brilliant. And you were saying though that you launch yourself at it, and that you were saying there that you're not trying to say you're very good, but you are. You were very well known on the punk scene from the start. And when you started to play actually with the Teen Idols, and one of the bandmates of Henry Rollins in the Teen Idols, Ian MacKay, I've interviewed actually, so you might want to check that out. But you played with the Teen Idols when the singer started to stop showing up, and you actually joined HR from Bad Brains on stage. So what was all of that like?
Well, that was the moment with HR and the Bad Brains was it's a pretty cool story. I'll give you a quick version of it. There was a place maybe Ian told you about called Madam's Organ. And if you look in your DC punk rock history, that's a pretty meaningful place. And now I think it's a hair salon, but it was just a house in a part of Washington, D.C. called Adams Morgan. And when I was a young person growing up around there, it's a place to get beaten up and get your bike stolen. And now you can't even afford to park there. It's a much different scene. And so there was some hippies living in this place, and their living room had a small stage they built, and punk rock bands would play there. And there's Lucian Perkins, great photographer. He did photos of bands playing at Madam's Organ, I believe. And if you go online, you can find photos of like me and all kinds of other people. Alec Mackay, Ian's very talented brother. I think Ian and other people at Madam's Organ. Anyway, one night, it's me and at least 25 other people. And we're watching the Bad Brains on a stage about that high, and you can just walk up and the band will breathe on you. I mean, that you're that close to them. And HR looks at me between songs, and it's more like a party than a show. And it's a living room. We're all just kind of standing there. And he said, Henry, you're a singer. And I said, oh, come on, man. No, I mean, you're like the singer, man. You're HR. And he said, no, you're a singer. And tonight, you're going to sing with the Bad Brains. And he gets off stage, which is, again, this high. And he hands me the mic, and he points at the stage like, you get up there. So I obediently hop up on stage. And I know these guys, so, and I kind of know the audience. And they're like, oh, well, he's going to sing. Oh, well, like, let's go get a break. And I kind of know the songs. And so he goes like, go, pick a song. And, the rest of the Bad Brains are artfully going to play along with this charade. And I picked, I think, a mid-tempo song, Redbone in the City. And it doesn't go at hyper speed, so a mere mortal like me can even sing it. And so I kind of get through the song. And I believed, HR pointed, do it again. So I picked out something else. Yeah, I stagger through. And then I hand the microphone back to HR and gratefully step off stage. The imposter has left. And the whole time he's standing in front of me with a stern look on his face, with his arms crossed, like, he's inspecting my performance. And he was like kind of angry. He said, see, you're a singer. And tonight you were saying with the goddamn Bad Brains. I said, okay. And, and then the show resumed. And that was kind of, in a way, a shot in the arm, where he said, I see something in you. Or maybe he just wanted to see if I would bomb so everyone could have a laugh. I don't know. It was a long, long time ago. At this point, we're getting around, 45 years ago, something like that. And I can't say that I went home that night thinking HR has given me the green light, but it was pretty damn cool, to have someone of that magnitude kind of, give you the nudge. And so soon after that, I was in a band called SOA, which ended up being the second band to release a record on Discord, the first being Teen Idols, and which came out, I believe, in the beginning of 1981. And by summer of 1981, I've auditioned to be in Black Flag, and I've left town. And so as far as answering your question, like, what was it like? Those days, there was nothing but, in my opinion, like infinite possibility, in that the scene was so small. If you want to meet the band, just walk over and talk to them, because they're all standing amongst each other watching the other bands play. And even if we had like a big import band come to town, like 999 or The Clash, it was fairly easy to walk backstage, or the band members might be milling around in the front of the venue or at the bar anyway. So to meet Joe Strummer certainly was cool, but it wasn't a high hurdle like trying to find Mick Jagger in a stadium at a Rolling Stones concert. And so this kind of music was like very actual, in that you could walk up to the front of the stage and like hit the singer's foot. You can get sweated on by Dee Dee Ramone. Like, the experience was so vivid. And that happened to me. I stood right in front of Dee Dee. The guy was like a faucet. The sweat came off him. Or, Lux Interior would ask you to help him take his pants off. And one night he kind of wriggled up to Ian and I and said, fellas, help me get these pants off. And Ian and I, of course, dutifully peeled Lux Interior's black jeans off his legs. And of course, they were inside out after we peeled them off. So we turned them right side out and folded them neatly and placed them on the stage. And after the show, we actually returned them to the dressing room. And that's how we met Nick Knox. But that's how those days were. And if you wanted to be in a band, you just kind of had to stand around and wave your arms. And someone would say, can you play bass? No. Well, then here's a bass. Like, practices in 5 minutes. Like, learn. And so suddenly, bands are popping up all around our little tiny scene. And I think this was probably happening in England And at least in the United States of America, Seattle, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, New York. Are you kidding? And so Arizona, and on and on and on. And certainly the Midwest, Michigan, the Necros. Um, and so it was a time where you could, I'm going to make a fanzine. And suddenly, in an hour, you're making a fanzine. Or if you're a real visionary like Ian MacKaye, he's like, well, let's get a band going. Okay, well, let's make a record. And I watch, you might find this is a kind of humorous factoid. You're 12 years old, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, I met Ian MacKaye when I was your age, and we have been best friends ever since. And we are two very old ass men, as you can see. And so I watched Ian kind of get the whole we're going to make a record idea together. I watched him build Discord records, on notebook paper. And, he's a guy who could see what wasn't there yet, and he could figure things out. And to this day, he's still the single most amazing person I've ever met. Like, with no one comes close. I've met some pretty astonishing people. And, but in those days, it was not completely unapproachable. And I grew up going to see like arena rock, Led Zeppelin, Ted Nugent before he was talking between songs. I saw Ted Nugent. Please forgive me for my sins. Led Zeppelin, Aerosmith, Van Halen. It was what was available to an underage kid because you could be 15 and pay $8.50 and go stand 150 yards away from Aerosmith and kind of see them. They're this big on stage, and it was okay. I never really thoroughly felt like that had rocked out because you're a mere spectator in a hockey arena. But when you could get up close and stand in front of the band, that was the change. It also made things more approachable because you met the band after the show, or it just seemed like, well, if those guys can do it, why not us? And I was never one of those persons who ever thought that about myself. I thought never me. And Ian, he's not a big ego guy. His whole family, there's a lot of Mackays. They're all highly intelligent, argumentative, hyper literate. They're readers and they like to discuss and argue. And Ian is of the mind of like, well, why not? Let's do this. Like if they did it, come on. And he figured it out. And so that's what those days were like. It was exciting because you watched your friends who the summer before were, on skateboards, on skateboard ramps, are now in the garage writing music. And that was Ian, went from the skateboard to the bass. And well, actually was doing both. But suddenly your friends are in a band and now you're helping them carry their gear from their car trunk into some bar to play. And you're standing in front of your best friend watching him like play bass in the Teen Idols. And then sitting in the studio watching them record, like, whoa, a recording studio. And so all of that was, well, as you can tell, I've never gotten over it. I'm still kind of taken by all of it. And I was a fan then, I'm a fan now.
That is really a really cool and amazing way to get onto the scene. And you mentioned there with SOA, for those who aren't familiar with SOA, is State of Alert. But the band, that was nearly the first time you officially stepped onto the scene with your own band. So you were watching Ian start up his own band, so you had some inspiration there. But what was it starting out? What was it like starting out? Did you have any problems that you encountered?
Well, yeah, my severe lack of talent was an impediment, but I overcame it. I just yelled louder. If you yell loud, you're not trying to sing. You're just yelling. So if you're yelling, you're not really worrying about the notes. You're just putting it out there. I just remember there was a band, the Extorts. This is a cool micro factoid of Washington, D.C. music history. There was a band called the Extorts. Their singer was going to leave the band and join another band and play guitar. Some band called Minor Threat. What did they ever get up to? And so Ian and I go to watch the Extorts play with the great Lyle Pressler, who's a ridiculously talented guitar player. We watch them play. And so the word is this band is going to be looking for a singer kind of sort of after this show, because Lyle's going to go and get in some band Ian's working on. And they said, well, you've got a big mouth. You want to do this? And I was like, well, why not? And so suddenly Lyle, Minor Threat is having band practice in Lyle's mom's basement. And I would go watch Minor Threat practice. And you could tell even at band practice, you're like, oh man, they're going to take over. Even like on day 5, they were great, just because the ingredients were perfect. Ian had the songs, had the lyrics. Jeff's already an established drummer. Brian Baker is a great guitar player who's now on bass. And like, he's just a very talented guy. And Lyle Pressler turns out is like this like surgeon, precise guitar player. And I was at the first Minor Threat show. And it was in a living room, 1926 Calvert Street on December 13th, 1980. And you just could watch it. You're like, well, Washington, D.C. now has its best band because the Bad Brains have left. And it's obviously Minor Threat. Anyway, I meet my future bandmates after the show. We all kind of grumble and, don't really talk much. And within several days, at least, probably like October of 1980, we're at band practice and we're writing new material. And I'm putting lyrics on a couple of their songs that now that Lyle has abandoned the song, they said, well, you put your lyrics on there. And suddenly I'm writing lyrics. And so I did that pretty quickly. And within, I don't know, several inspired days, we had a loose assemblage of songs. And our sets, we played, I don't know, a handful of times. And the set was, I don't know, 9 to 11 minutes long. Most of it was, are you ready? Yeah. Are you ready? Yeah. Are you ready? Like we weren't all that together. And so we would argue on stage in front of everyone. Shut up, you shut up. And then get a song out and then take 5 minutes to tune. But when we did play these like 30 to 45 second, convulsions of songs, people seemed to go like, well, that was, thank goodness that's over with. And so, but we got by. And we were on the same bills quite often with Minor Threat because, we're just all kind of like this next wave of bands along with like Scream. And we would play with the bands that would come to town, like the Dead Kennedys or DOA or whoever is coming to town. Like Black Flag came to Washington, D.C. And I believe Minor Threat opened, which was the obvious choice. And it was a really cool time. And I'm hoping this will not be taken the wrong way. Never once in my life have I ever had any fear of walking on stage. If you put me at a birthday party, I'll find a corner and hide. You put me in a crowd of people, I'll do my best to get by. I'm, nervous. But if you put me on stage, no fear whatsoever. And I don't know what that's about. But what I don't want you to think is that I think that I've got it. I just don't have any stage fright. And I'm not saying I'm any good. I just can go out there like, hey, here's a microphone. There's a cold audience. Like, go out and talk to them for half an hour. Okay. And Ian has that as well. Like Ian doesn't need a band to be on stage. He can just go out there and talk to them. And he'll have them and he'll keep them. And so when it was time for the first time SOA played, it was the same night Minor Threat did their first show. And I remember, we're in a living room on a piece of carpet. And the first thing I did was I looked at my friend Jay, who sadly passed away years ago. He was standing in front of me laughing, and I just punched him right in the solar plexus, and that's how the show started. Wham! And we kind of lurched forward through the set, and it was a blast. And from then to now, I've never had a moment of stage fright, even when I'm, walking onto the stage of the Sydney Opera House to a sold out audience on my own. I don't know why. And so being in that band was really fun because it was, you're young, you have unbelievable amounts of energy. You'll see, it doesn't last forever. And your peers are great. And the audiences were friendly. We knew each other. And then, the waters got more choppy when I joined Black Flag. That's like from like playing basketball with your friends into the NBA, where suddenly, like, getting knocked down and getting your doors blown off is a regular occurrence.
Wow, just coming onto the scene like that, and especially where you were saying that just being at the same gig as Minor Threat, that's really cool because you don't see many people who were able to say that they were at the first Minor Threat gig. And I read that a friend actually, the first time that you learned of Black Flag, was that a friend of yours gave you and Ian Mackay a copy of Nervous Breakdown
Yeah.
EP by Black Flag. Um, what was your first thoughts when you listened to them?
Well, Ian and I were music fans. We'd go to this one record store owned by a guy named Skip Groff, who sadly passed away. He produced our first records. He helped Ian get his first record pressed at a place called National, which is still a pressing plant that I'm about, I don't know, 5 exits down the highway from, sitting in front of you right now in Nashville, Tennessee, where I live. And so let's see. Ian and I, we would read like Slash magazine, anything from the West Coast. We would get bad, poorly recorded copies of Rodney on the Rock, Rodney Bingenheimer, his radio show, because we want to hear what's going on anywhere in America as far as like punk rock, independent music. And we're looking at the fanzines, anything we can get our hands on from any source, a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox. And you see this band Black Flag, and it looks intense, and the logo looks dangerous. There's just something about it. Like, we want to know more. Even the name, it just sounds heavy. And so a guy named Mitch Parker gave Ian and I the Nervous Breakdown EP. And Ian said, well, you're the record collector. You're the guy who holds on to everything with the records. So you keep it. And so it's our record, but it's in a box on my shelf. But it belongs to both of us. I'm just holding on to it for Ian. And we listened to it, and it, at least for me, it fulfilled every expectation I had for what I wanted that band to sound like. The songs are amazing. It's Greg Ginn, Chuck Dukowski, and Keith Morris singing. And Keith is one of the most naturally persuasive people I've ever seen on a stage holding a microphone. Like, the charisma is like that of like Iggy Pop. Like, the guy just has it. And if you've ever been in front of it, it's truly something to behold. Like, Keith cannot miss. He's like the Zen archer. Like, in his sleep, he'll get it right. Anyway, we were fascinated by the record because it didn't sound like any record we had. And Ian, and this is a perfect example of Ian Mackay. We're talking at one point, I'm forgetting exactly when this was, and he very casually brings up, he was like, yeah, I was talking to Chuck Dukowski and Greg Ginn today. And like, everything in your hands drops. Like, you did what? Like, yeah, I called SST Records. Like, how did you do that? He's like, you get on the phone and you ask the operator for the phone number. And he did that. And he basically called SST like, hey, I've got a label called Discord Records. You guys are going to be coming to Washington, D.C. Like, do you need a place to stay? Like, you can stay, at Beecher Street, at my mom's place, and on and on. And they took the call, obviously. And so Ian had talked to these two people, and I'm still in kind of like in arena rock mode. Like, you can't talk to the gods. And Ian's like, oh, yeah? Like, and that's a typical Mackay move. Like, how'd you talk to the president? I called the White House. I got him on the phone. That's Ian. Like, that's textbook Mackay. Anyway, we drive up to New York to see them play at the Peppermint Lounge. And then a day or so later, the Black Flag ventures down to Washington, D.C. to play the 930 Club for 2 sets. And I believe Minor Threat was the opener on that. And I watched them all 3 sets. They played 1 show in New York and 2 sets, like a 7 and a 9 or whatever it was down in Washington. Small venue, like they could pack it out. And I remember watching them from a fair distance away, kind of angry and sad. Angry that I liked their music too much. Sad that I wasn't Des Cadena on stage singing. I really wanted to be in that band. And I'm not putting Des down. He's a wonderful guy and a really good singer, great guitar player. He's a real gent, Des is. I just wanted to be the guy in that band. Mainly, they were angry the way I was angry. I mean, they were burning angry. And I'm an angry person then. I'm an angry person now. I'm angry, not at you, with you. But I'm just wired that way. And so I saw them. I'm like, that's it. That is the band. And damn, and at that point I was wearing an ice cream shirt that said Haagen-Dazs, wearing an apron with a paper hat on, scooping ice cream. That was my job. And I wanted to be with Black Flag. And that was, we saw them in, I think, April of 1981. And by July, I was in the band. Again, that whole thing of things being possible in those days. But Black Flag, the Nervous Breakdown EP, now and then I'll listen to it, and it kind of puts me in a state of awe, as it did then. It's a great record. It's a 4-track EP. It's a perfect record. It's a perfect record.
That's really, really cool to be so aware of a band and then join it. It really gives a unique perspective when you're up there on the stage. But regarding the stage, not only are you a musician, but you've also in the 1980s you started to become a spoken word artist. And I think this is very interesting. And you did some great spoken word albums. And still, I know to this day you're still doing spoken word gigs. And my favorite spoken word record that you have is Eric the Pilot. But why did you actually, yeah, it's brilliant. But why did you decide to become a spoken word artist?
For $10. 1983, there was a local promoter in Los Angeles, a very enterprising guy. And he did these really cool shows. He would get a venue, like his idea would move all around Los Angeles. One night it's in a bar, a week later it's in a small club. And the concept was, we'll get like 15 or 20 people and everyone gets 5 minutes. And we're going to mix it up. It'll be an actor, 2 poets, the Jeffrey Lee Pierce of the Gun Club, D. Boone of the Minutemen, Chuck Tukowski of Black Flag, Exene from X, and this performance artist, and everyone gets 5 minutes. And so even if the person is bombing, it's only 5 minutes. And so you can be as outrageous as you want or unprepared as you want. It's only 5 minutes. Chuck Tukowski would be on the bill. Like, Chuck, the bass player in Black Flag. And like Chuck is this kind of visionary. He's utterly brilliant. Like he's got a mind. They broke the mold on that brain. No one thinks like that guy. He's fascinating. Anyway, he would be on the bill. And so he would take the Black Flag van, and we lived way out in the sticks by the beach. and he would go into what they call the big smoke, Hollywood, to go do his 5 minutes. I would go with him because otherwise you're just sitting around SST staring at the floor looking at the bugs. And so I'd get in the van with him and we would go into town where, go see a show, check it out. And so I would go. And one night, Chuck does his thing. He'd read out of this notebook of like, hey, why? It was, I can't speak for him. It was just completely dangerous. Anyway, after the show's over, the promoter guy comes up to me. He said, well, we're doing a show in 2 weeks. Why don't we put you on the bill? And I said, to do what? And he said, I don't know. You got 5 minutes. Figure it out. And I said, no, man, I don't know what I would do. He said, you got a big mouth. You'll figure something out. And, he's right about the first part. And so he goes, we're paying like $10. I'm like, oh, because that's a lot of food you can buy. Like we were so broke in those days and, you're hungry all the time. So I said, $10? Damn, man. Yes, I'm in. And so, I don't know, a few Saturdays later, I'm on the bill. I believe at a place called the Lhasa Club. It's gone now. It's on Hudson and Santa Monica in Hollywood, California. And it's time for me to do my 5 minutes. And so for like 2.5 minutes, I told a quick story about what had happened at band practice the day before, which Greg Ginn had walked from our practice place to a liquor store to get some orange juice, and two neo-Nazis in a car tried to run him over because we were playing our music in a Hispanic neighborhood, and the local gangsters, like the local gang, would come and hang out at band practice, and you're gonna say no? You let them hang out. And so that you got to get along because you're leaving your gear in their neighborhood. And they would come over and like, what do you guys, punk rock? We're like, yeah, I guess. Whatever won't get us killed. And so we've got these gangster guys kind of lurking around band practice. And the local neo-Nazis didn't like it because we're, white guys hanging out with brown guys. And so they see Greg Ginn walking to the liquor store and they try and run him over. And luckily, Greg is like fleet of foot, very fast. And so he runs up on a lawn and escapes the car trying to run him over. And classic Greg Ginn, he dodges the car, goes to the liquor store, gets the orange juice, comes back. I almost got run over by two neo-Nazis in a car. And the rest of us like, run! He's like, no, let's work on it. We went right back to band practice. This is, a day in the life. And I told this story, and the audience's jaws hit the ground because it's gnarly. But for Black Flag, it's Tuesday afternoon. It's just kind of, the way it was. And then I read like 2 things that I had written on the back of Black Flag flyers, and I looked at my watch, had the stopwatch on, and my 5 minutes were up. I said, well, thanks, good night. And people are going, more. I'm like, well, no, the next person has to get on stage. And so the show comes to an end, and the promoter said, so did you like that? I'm like, yeah, it was fun. And people were coming up to me going, when's your next show? And I thought they meant Black Flag. I'm like, well, we're leaving on tour or whatever. They go, no, the next show where you just talk. I went, well, never. I got this $10 bill. I'm going to go buy some dented avocados and some moldy cheese and live. And they said, you got to do that again. I'm like, well, we'll see. And so the promoter said, look, you're a natural at that. How about you'll open for one of my poets at a poetry reading, and we'll give you 15 minutes and $25. I'm like, well, okay. And after about a dozen shows of that, the poets, unhappily, were opening for me because I became the draw. And now it's like, 30 minutes and like $30 or whatever. And by 1985, I went across the country doing shows, getting at least 8 to 12 people a night, a little more in bigger cities. And then by 86, I'm invited to a poetry thing in Europe. And by 87, I'm doing like, 15, 16 countries just on my own. And then I just finished 261 shows in 28 countries several weeks ago, 100 years later. And so it's kind of started wanting to eat and getting this like 5 or 6 minutes on stage, just making a fool of myself. And now I make a fool of myself worldwide.
I mean, I have to say, I've listened to a couple of your spoken word albums, and I find them actually very interesting, and very clever. And one of your spoken word albums, Get in the Van, On the Road with Black Flag, actually won the Grammy for the best spoken word recording.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
That night, I was nominated for two Grammys. One for the audio book for Get in the Van, and the other for Best Video for a song called Liar. And
Oh, brilliant track.
thank you. This would be the 1995 Grammys. And so we are there days in advance doing the song over and over and over again because the camera people need to rehearse because it's television and nothing can go wrong. And so I'm in this like sweated out t-shirt and a pair of gym shorts with a Grammys performer laminate around my neck so I don't get thrown out of the building. And in the afternoon, they're going to have the non-televised Grammys, which is for, engineering. There's a bunch of Grammys that are given out. The ones for all the pretty people are at night where you see it on TV. In the afternoon, they give it out for like engineering and audiobook, like the kind of like, lesser known parts of the entertainment business. And so the audiobook Grammy part was going to be in the afternoon. And so I just wandered into the venue with the guy who's going to be doing our front of house sound, a really talented engineer named David Bianco, who made a lot of records with Rick Rubin. And Bianco was so talented, and sadly he passed away. Wonderful guy. And so I said, hey, David, I'm going to, go not get a Grammy. Like, let's go sit down and watch me not get a Grammy. And we're sitting there, laughing because I'm up against someone reading, I think Charlton Heston reading the Bible, the good book, and someone else doing an audiobook about the history of baseball. So I'm up against the Bible, God, and America's favorite pastime before gun homicide. And so how can I win against those mighty odds? And I said, David, if I win, I'm going to go on stage and I'll say, David, I love you, man. He's like, oh, very funny. And we're sitting there with our, workingman's laminates on. And they go and they read out all the names. And, Henry Rollins, Get in the Van. I'm like, wow, that's my name through the sound system. And the winner is Henry Rollins, Get in the Van. And David and I look at each other like, excuse me? Like, did that just happen? And he goes, go, go, go. So I walk down the aisle to the front of the stage. And I got to walk up the stairway to get onto the stage. Two security guys come together and they look at each other because I look like, road crew. You can see the sweat stains on my shirt because I've been singing the one song all morning. And they look at each other like, I'm like, no, I'm that guy. And they look at someone else because no one knows me. I'm just not familiar in this arena. And so someone finally goes, I don't know, like we're burning daylight. Put them on. And I walked up on stage and I said, I bet it's interesting for people like you to look at someone like me holding something like this. And I'm holding the Grammy. It doesn't have my name on it yet. That takes like 6 weeks. It comes in the mail, literally. So they give you a blank Grammy and you're supposed to hold it up. You have to give it back. And I said, I'd like to thank, my lawyer, my manager, and David Bianco. I love you, man. And I see David dive off of his seat onto the floor. And they like kind of snatch the Grammy out of my hand and shove me off stage. And I'm sent down the hall to this series of like, gotta go do press. Like you're just like sent into this world of MTV and they give you a different Grammy per appearance. And like you hold the Grammy, you talk for some radio show or something, E Entertainment, and then they take it away from you and then you're shoved into another room. And that took like another 2 hours. And I get kind of shot out the back of that back to band practice with like, oh, wow. And weeks later, a Grammy comes in the mail. And I almost immediately, I in those days I had my office with my staff, we running the book company, and we would put the Grammy in on different people's desks every day, and everyone would make fun of it. Like they'd all take pictures with it, like hang stuff on it, like thanks very much. And finally, everyone made so much fun of it, I just gave it away. And years later, my manager, Heidi, the big boss in my life, she goes, "Where's your Grammy?" I'm like, "I gave it to a guy, I don't know, like 20 years ago." She goes, "You got to get it back." I'm like, She's like, "No, get it back." So I called the guy and I said, "Do you mind if I'm getting the boss is giving me a bunch of static. You mind if I get the Grammy back?" He goes, like, "I'm looking at it right now. It's been like sitting on my desk, like the whole, for the last, 5 presidential administrations. Come and get it." I drove to his office and I put it in my Subaru Outback or whatever I was driving, and I drove it back to the office, and it's around here somewhere. I put it in a box, and I'm sure I marked the box, but if you told me like go run and find it, I don't know where it is. It's in this building somewhere.
Wow, that's a really great story. And just even there, you were up with a reading of the Bible. That is just, and the
Yeah.
fact that you came in not knowing that you were going to come out with the Grammy, that's really cool. And you were saying there like earlier that you did everything. And soon after this, and even during this, when you were getting this Grammy, you mentioned there about the track Liar, but that was from Rollins Band. And you started the Rollins Band, you got a ton of people together and started making music. So, what inspired this to start a new band and make new music?
Well, Black Flag ended very suddenly and very acrimoniously in the summer of 1986. And I reckoned I had two choices: either hit the ground or hit the ground running, either have a little crisis or just go, new day, new band, let's go. And I went for that. And there's a guy I grew up with in Washington, D.C. named Chris Haskett, who was in a really good band called the Enzymes, great D.C. band. And Chris and I, we grew up together. I would always go see his band play. I'm a huge Enzymes fan. Chris is a great guy. And he used to live in England. He was living in Leeds. And when Black Flag would play in England, he'd hang out. And he's a DC guy, but lives in England, went to school there. And he said, well, if Black Flag ever breaks up, ha ha, like that'll ever happen, we should make a record. And I said, well, let's do that. And so Black Flag indeed broke up. And I was in Washington, D.C., kind of licking my wounds. And Chris was there on a brief break from living in England. He was back visiting his parents. And I somehow knew that. And I called him. And I said, well, man, the Eagle has landed. The band is over. And he said, great, no problem. I have a place in England we can live and practice. I've got a rhythm section. And fly out to England and we'll make a record. And in those days, I had been around SST Records and Discord. I understood it is possible to write songs and make a record. That is not impossible. Not easy, but not impossible. I started writing lyrics for songs, started coming up with riffs in my head because I'd been at it at this point for a few years, knew my way around it a little. October of 1986, I fly to England. I think I took a bus up to Leeds out of Heathrow. And I'm living, there's a bunch of streets with Herald, like Herald Court, Herald Mount. I'm living in the Heralds near the university in Leeds, beautiful city. And I meet these people that Chris has assembled. We're young and terrified and broke. And we write a bunch of songs in a week. And we record them in a few days with my meager savings. So we made the record. We couldn't even afford the to keep the 2-inch tape. So the multi-track tape, I believe, got recorded over as soon as we finished mixing. So I've got the mixed down tapes, but the master tapes, yeah, who knows? Anyway, I go back to America with this bunch of tape under my arm, and that became a little solo record. And then in the spring of 1987, I called up some people, Chris and a rhythm section who I knew. And that was April of 87. By May, we're on the road. That's the Rollins Band. And we wrote songs while we were touring. And then the tour finishes almost a year to the day. We were in England the year before making the solo record. And that became a record called the Lifetime album. And I called Ian from a payphone in Leeds. I said, I've got, a bunch of very talented, argumentative bandmates. They all want to produce the record, which means it's going to be a nightmare of like everyone walking over and pushing their instrument up in the mix. How about a little more bass? How about some more kick drum? You'll never get anything done. And the band will be like, killing each other. So Ian said, Ian can produce a record. He's quite good. He goes, I'll fly out and produce the record. I said, I don't have enough money for your plane flight. He was like, don't worry about it. And that's Ian. And so I said to the band, Ian's going to fly out here and kind of be, the OG peacemaker, and he's going to produce it. And Ian commands a lot of respect. And everyone kind of went, okay, that we can agree on. Like the sober judge will mix the record. So he shows up. All right, lads, let's go. And we go into the studio. And like the band, like, we'll do another take. And he's like, nope, that's all the time we have. That take was good. Moving on. And we recorded and mixed the entire thing in 5 days for like, I don't know, $2,200. And then Ian flew home. I left on tour. I stayed in Europe and did a whole other tour on my own. And I was paying my band members back because I owed them all money because the tour bombed. And came back with the tape under my arm. And that record came out later and on and on. And so it was just basically determination to stay doing music. And it should be said, no real plan B. I never had it in my mind, I'm a musician. I'd run away from that accusation. But hey, man, I still had something in me. I still wanted to be in a band. And so I figured, let's just make it happen. And the band ended up playing all over the world, everything from the Grammys to Woodstock, and had quite the time, and not always fun. Like being in a band, I ask anyone who's in one, it's not always fun. Sometimes, it's when you're not trying to kill everyone else in the band, you can kind of, it's okay. And so it was a hell of an experience, but basically it's kind of demonstrative of many things in my life. I just wanted to do it, and I just went for it. I have a high school education. I barely got out of high school, so I'm the dimmest bulb in the chandelier. And so I've been kind of winging it, as they say, since 1979. I've just been, let's try this. So like in the late 1980s, when I started getting asked, hey, you want to be in a movie? Why not? Can you act? No. Why let that stop you? And so I, ended up being in a bunch of movies and whatever else. But it's just been the idea of just going for it. And I've always considered myself nobody from nowhere. I'm Henry from the ice cream store. What do I have to lose? If I'm doing a movie and they go, you suck, get out of here. You're not telling me something I don't already know. And so why not run at it? They're handing out pencils, like go get some. And so that's kind of been from then to now, just trying to keep it interesting, and interesting things have come my way, and I've kind of, found myself in the right place at the right time.
I actually want to ask you about one very interesting thing that happened with the Rollins Band, where the Rollins Band appeared at Lollapalooza. That must have been really cool to appear at such a legendary festival.
Yeah, we were on the first Lollapalooza, and we were the first band on stage because we're the opening band, the band that no one gets to see because they're all still asleep. And so we were the first noise ever heard at the first ever Lollapalooza. And the year before, Rollins Band was doing a lot of shows at Jane's Addiction, one of the best bands I've ever seen. And they liked us, we liked them, and we were a good opening band. The bands got along, their audience didn't hate us, and so it worked out. And one day, we're following them, in our van, following their tour buses. The band, two guys would be in one tour bus, and the other two guys would be in another tour bus. They were living large. And so their road manager said, Perry wants you in his bus today. And so for the first time in my life, I walked into a tour bus, and I looked like, Bright Lights, Big City. I'm looking around like, is that a bathroom? You guys have a bathroom on this thing? They're like, yeah, because they didn't understand I'd never been on a tour bus before. And so they go, well, Perry wants to talk to you. And so I go back in the back lounge, and he's like, hey, man, I'm going to do this festival called Lollapalooza, man. And he explains Lollapalooza. He goes, what do you think, man? I go, it sounds like it'd be pretty cool. And he goes, okay, you can go. I go back to the front of the bus. And later that day, my road manager comes up and says, hey, Perry and his road manager want to have a word with you in the Jane's Addiction dressing room. I go in there, and he goes, hey, man. I'm doing a bad Perry imitation. Anyway, he said, we want Rollins Band to be on the first half of this Lollapalooza tour happening summer 1991. And you'll be on the first half, and then you'll leave, and some other lucky band will be on the second half, and all the other bands will do the whole tour. And I don't think there was a lineup yet. If there was, I'm not remembering it. Anyway, I said, okay. And so I've been at this a long time. And, I'm not one to blow my own horn, and I have no idea why I did this. Maybe I was just mad. I said, so the one who's been treading the boards, getting ashtrays thrown at his head, I get half the tour, and all these other bands get the whole tour? No, I'll take the whole tour or no tour. And Rick Smith, the road manager, looks at me like, wow, way to kiss goodbye a really good opportunity. And I think Ted, the manager of Jane's, and Perry both looked at me like, whoa, that's a lot of spine there, old man. And then one of them said, you know what? You're right. And you guys are cool and we like you. Screw it. You'll be the opening band on Lollapalooza. I was like, whew. And I think I probably could have renegotiated. If they said, no, you'll get half of the tour or nothing, I would have gone like, oh, thank you. I would have taken it. They wouldn't have said, no, and kicked me out of the room, I'm sure. Nice guys. And so I basically dared and got it, and ended up being on the first ever Lollapalooza tour. And so there's a thing you'll see backstage called a day sheet. And it gives you the running order of the bands. You'll see it like somebody from the production office wax it up on your dressing room wall every day. And it'll tell you, here's mealtime, showtime, curfew, all of that. And any things that need to be mentioned, like, hey, a TV crew will be here for Jane's Addiction tonight. Get out of the way, whatever. And I took the day sheet down from the wall, and I still have it 122 years later. It says, Jane's Addiction welcomes Rollins Band to Lollapalooza. And that's how we got on the tour. And I've done a few tours in my life, and I think that might be the funnest tour I ever did, where I hated it going away so much the last day was Seattle, I believe. And I was so like lump in my throat, this like happy place of touring was going away. I didn't want to stay. So I finished our set, opening set. I had a ride planned. I showered up, changed up. I had, a duffel bag of clothes, and I got a ride to the airport. And by the time Jane's Addiction was on stage, like by the time like Living Color was on stage, I was already back in my little place in Venice, California, wishing I had not stupidly gotten on a plane and left the site. I just didn't want to face the end of it. And I regret that to this day, that I couldn't have been there on the side of the stage, because I watched Jane's Addiction every night, like every night. And it was a great time. Ice-T and I would eat lunch every day. He's a professor, that guy. He's so smart. And he said, you come and sing with Body Count. I'm like, okay. And so I ended up doing like 2 sets a day. I'd go do my set, and then I'd get on stage and sing a few songs with Ice-T every day. And we had a really good time on that tour. And then, Lollapalooza, still goes on to this day. It's quite a thing. But on the first one, it was kind of this interesting social experiment. Like, will it work? And every day, yeah, it worked. Like 20,000 people showed up every day. But no one was ever sure that anyone would show up, because it was kind of sort of untried. It was like this new thing that Perry had cooked up. And thankfully, the lineup was such that it attracted enough people. Certainly, Jane's Addiction was a huge draw. But when you put in Living Color and Susie and the Banshees, you're going to probably be doing okay. But what was really fun to watch was Nine Inch Nails, because they weren't big yet. But as the tour went on, meanwhile, on MTV and radio, they were becoming big. And as far as crowd reaction, by midway through the tour, there's 2 bands driving 20,000 people crazy: Jane's Addiction and Nine Inch Nails. And by the time the thing was over, it was like overwhelmingly clear Nine Inch Nails is probably going to take over the world. And for good reason. It's a great band. But it was crazy to watch that happen during the tour, because they'd go out like the first 5 shows and they got an audience. 10 shows later, it's like uncontrollable. By the time we got to the Midwest, it's Beatlemania. It's nuts. And then I think towards the end of the tour, they had to leave, because some band called Guns N' Roses wanted them to be their opener. And bands started to fill in, like the Violent Femmes and Fishbone, bands like that would come in and do the fill-in slots, because Nine Inch Nails had to say farewell.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
just I actually didn't know that was the first Lollapalooza, but that is really just really incredible that you got to see that all happening around you.
Yeah, it was
And
amazing.
wow though. I love that story. But now I want to move on to something completely different
Sure.
that I think is very, very interesting. You had a show called Henry's Film Corner on the
Yeah.
Independent Film Channel. Now, did you get any backlash from people from your ratings of films or your reviews of films? Did anybody react differently to how you thought?
Um, Not that I'm remembering. Um, uh, I think some people were surprised to find me doing a film review show. But hey, man, why not? Like, it was offered to me, and I like films. And so I said, sure. And so that started, I think, 4 years I was on the Independent Film Channel doing different shows. And it was an interesting time. I got to go see a lot of films. I interviewed some really interesting actors. And it was a very enjoyable time. I learned a lot. And I ended up interviewing a whole bunch of people over the years on the Independent Film Channel. And it was just, it's that thing. I don't fit in anywhere. So why not try everything? I I feel at home on stage. Um, but anything else, I'm like, yeah, man, I'll go for it because I can take that which I already have and apply it. Focus, discipline, tenacity, preparation, taking the job very seriously while not taking myself seriously. And that allowed me, the actors would say to me after I'd interview them, like, wow, you really did your homework. I said, yeah, you're Samuel L. Jackson. Are you kidding? What, I'm going to sleep on this? Like, you must respect the person you're interviewing. You must do your due diligence and prepare. You can't say, were you ever in a band? Yeah. You can't, you got to be ready. And so that's how you show the person you're interviewing respect. And I think that's a good way to get a good interview. I mean, I've been interviewed by a lot of people, and some people, it's a weekly newspaper. They've looked at your bio for like 20 seconds. They get you on the phone and they basically, don't know anything. So you have to do the interview for them. Like, so my name is Henry. And you just kind of fill it in for them. You give them their 3 inches of column and then hang up and move on to the next one. And I've done that, if I had $1 for every time I've had to do that. And so when I started interviewing people, I tried to think, well, what are the interviews I enjoyed? Well, the ones where the person really was prepared and had an objective. They had something they were interested in ripping out of me. And so I went into these interviews very agenda driven. Like I was after a thing, a factoid, a story, or a point of view. And I think the people I interviewed appreciate. I never had anyone storm off the set. So
Wow. I know when I originally read up about that, I went, that is so different to anything you've ever done, a film review show. But something else that you did was another TV show that you had was the Henry Rollins show. And you had some really cool guests on this, such as Chuck D,
yeah.
Ozzy Osbourne, and you also had Frank Black, just to name a few. What was it like meeting all these really influential, famous, and just pure geniuses in their field?
Well, I'm a fan. I went into music as a fan. I joined Black Flag as a fan of Black Flag. And so I'm basically 63. I'll be 63 in a couple of days. I'm still a fan. I go to the show, I buy the t-shirt. I'm always the oldest person in the building. It's funny. And so I already had the records. Like, who doesn't like the Pixies? Are you kidding? And like Frank's solo records are, Charles, um, Frank Black's solo records are good too. And, Public Enemy, it's one of the best bands I've ever heard. And Chuck is one of the most logical, clear thinking people I've ever met. And so I was a fan, but I did my preparation. And so whenever these people would walk into the studio and Ozzy, I had done shows with Ozzy, and like he's one of the coolest people. Like, he wears his mega stardom very well. He's a great guy. And all of these people are cool. Most musicians you meet, they're pretty cool. And it was a great time, because I was a fan already. I knew the records backwards and forwards. I already had questions. I just wrote them out, memorized them. And when they came into our building, I was kind of like a spring-loaded trap, like, and go. Ah! I just kind of like throw myself at it. And I run into Chuck every few years. I saw Chuck last summer or the summer before. We were both Shepard Fairey, the great graphic artist. Chuck did the music and I did the intro for an opening for Shepard. So Chuck and I were both, on the staff that night. And Chuck's great, and one time I was hanging out after a Johnny Cash show in the VIP area with my, little sticker on. I went there with Rick Rubin, so I got in with all the swank folks. And I'm milling around, hanging out with Joe Strummer, who was there. And yes, I'm name dropping. And there's Frank Black. And I've known him since the Pixies days. And I said, hey, man, what are you up to? And he said, hey, you and I are both, washed up. I said, probably. He said, end of our careers. No one likes us. I go, right. He goes, okay, how about this? We're going to go to Las Vegas and be a doubles act. Hank and Frank. What do you say? I said, let's do it, man. And then it's so funny. And so getting to meet all those musicians was really, really cool. And having live musicians on the show, the Stooges, Dinosaur Jr., Slayer. Are you kidding me? We had Sinead O'Connor perform, and yeah, I really miss her. She was a very special performer. Like that voice is unreal. And when I watched her sing, she sang without effort. Like it was just perfect. She'd open her mouth, this voice comes out, like every hair on your arm stands up. And we had a really good time doing that show because we just got incredible interviews. Gene Simmons, like he's different, funny guy. And we had amazing bands play. Like you're standing in front of the Stooges. They're playing in front of you. Like, Pinch Me. That's my favorite band. And, we were super lucky. And with the Independent Film Channel, we would send them the finished show. So you send them the show. And in show business, they send you back what they call the notes. Like, we love the show, but you need to fix this, 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 and this. And they'd call me like, okay, well, the notes came back. I'm like, oh, we have to basically start again. And the notes were, there's no notes. They loved it, and they're ready for next week's product. And so the Independent Film Channel never told us, hey, can you cool it? Hey, can you slow down a little? They never said anything other than, great. We can't wait for the next one. And for that, I cannot thank them enough. Because other shows I've done, like National Geographic, History Channel, notes, like, you're in post-production, like thinking you're never going to get out.
Yeah, it's great to hear that feedback like that. Especially like a lot of people are fans of what you do, and to also interview people and you just jumped into it. I bet it must have been incredible to just get feedback saying that they loved the interview and you just jump at it. It just shows great dedication. And as well as this, you also had a radio show on Indie 103.1 called Harmony in My Head. Is that from the Buzzcocks song?
Absolutely. It's a perfect song from a band that wrote one perfect song after another. Um, it's one of my favorite songs of all time. Great Steve Diggle vocal on that one,
Yeah.
putting down the great work of Mr. Shelley. But it's a great song. And Ian and I, we were buying those 7-inch records that informed the Singles Going Steady record. We were buying those records as they were coming out. And they would drift across the Atlantic Ocean. And I wasn't reading like Sounds or Enemy or Melody Maker, so I don't know when the next Buzzcocks record is coming out. I would just stagger into the record store and like, oh, look, there's another one. And you'd go home and put it on, and it's like two perfect songs. Like, in my opinion, all the United Artists era Buzzcocks, which would be, all that early group of songs, there's not a bad one in the bunch. It's just amazing music. And so I had that radio show, and radio, like real radio, like network radio, is really expensive. It's like a furnace that burns money, and so you have to shovel money into it, like like you're trying to put coal into an engine to make a train go down the track. And Indie 103, we were having way too much fun. Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols, he's got a show. Rob Zombie has a show. One of the members of Jane's Addiction has a show. I've got a show. It's madness. So, of course, they run out of money. Indie 103, sadly, goes away into the sunset. And about a week later, KCRW, the big National Public Radio affiliate in Southern California, Jason Bentley, the show manager, he calls me and said, hey, I heard Indie 103 went away. And I thought he was calling to, make fun. And I went, yeah, pile on, pal. And he went, no, I'm sorry about that. We would like to know if you'd like a show here at KCRW. Whoa, that was 15 years ago next month. I'm still there. And so I've been on the radio for about the last 20 years. And this room I'm in, this is where I build my radio show. This is my little makeshift studio that was built I'm in an attic in a crawl space. A bunch of He-Man carpenters built this for me.
It's a great setup, actually. And it's cool that you're still doing the same radio show. It's incredible. And you have appeared and presented many things, but you actually have done many podcasts. But you have one that I'd like to focus on called Henry and Heidi,
Yeah.
which I loved having a listen to. Why did you decide to start a podcast with
I,
Heidi?
I didn't. It was Heidi. Heidi, she and I have been working together. It was 26 years last October. So 26 years and some months. The two of us have been arguing nonstop. We argue every day. And so we're the best of friends. She's great. She's the smart one. And so between Ian Mackay and Heidi, they know kind of everything that's ever happened to me, for better or for worse. And so Heidi and I, we worked together. When I lived in Los Angeles, I had a big building and we had offices next to each other with a wall between us for our own safety. But we talk all the time. And one day Heidi comes, storming into my side of the building, and she goes, like, you have told me every story that you have. I'm like, probably 3 times, and it's true. She said, how many of those stories have not made stage? I'm like, probably a lot of them. I don't know, because I got a million of them. And she said, we need to do a podcast, and the podcast will be, I'll tee up a few stories, like I know what to ask you to tell, and you'll tell me the story. I said, well, I've got my one microphone to make my little radio show. And she said, well, then get 2. Like, figure it out. And so I called my pal who's an engineer, and I said, can you tell me what gear to get to have 2 microphones? Because the boss says we're making a podcast. And so, I buy whatever. And, he's the smart one. He plugs it all in. He goes, you talking to that one? Heidi, you talking to that one? No fighting. And that was the start of the podcast. And he taught me, Henry, you press this button and that button. Voila, both mics are on. And here's your mix. There's no mix. It's like equal, input. And and Heidi, she's an editor and she knows how to edit. So she has an editing bay at her house. She's really smart. And so she would take the podcast and clean it up and tighten it up. If there's a few uhs and ahas or whatever, she'd get rid of them. So the thing would lose a few minutes and kind of, be a little bit better for speed. And we'd put it out there. And suddenly we have this audience and it's going to the top of iTunes and we're getting people offering us money to advertise on our podcast, which I guess is a thing. And so that was a little weird. So we did the podcast until COVID. And then, lockdown, she's working out of her house. I'm working in that building. And then as the fog of COVID is lifting, I moved. I moved across the country to Nashville, Tennessee, where I'm talking to you now. And now Heidi and I are thousands of miles away from each other. And I'm sure we could do the podcast with modern technology. But we just, I went on tour and I just got off. I've been really busy working on some projects here. And we just kind of never got it going again. And I get asked about it all the time. Like, are you going to do the podcast again? And, that's a good question. And for which I have no good answer. With this newer gear I've got here, I've got 2 mic ends and I've got some microphones. I think I could probably get a tutorial from my engineer pal and I could get the snarling blonde menace in this room and we could probably do a podcast. Will we? I don't know. She'll be out here pretty soon because we're going to be editing 2 books of mine. And so we'll be shoulder to shoulder arguing 8 hours a day over, copy editing. And so maybe, but people seem to like it. And I think one of the main reasons was like, the price was right. It's free. But yeah, it got people still ask me about it now.
That's great. And it's actually because I love podcasts myself and I listen to a lot of podcasts, but my favorite type of one is when there's stories there. That's
Uh-huh.
why I'm such a massive fan of Henry and Heidi. And with all the stuff that we've spoken about, and with your whole career, I was reading a biography on Dave Grohl, and he was there was pictures in it, and one of the pictures actually had a caption that said, "Here's Dave Grohl when he was a freshman in high school, and he used to play Black Flag over the intercoms." You've inspired people such as Josh Homme. For those who don't know, Josh Homme is from Queen's Stone Age. You can catch my interview with him on my YouTube channel. You then have Dave Grohl, just some really cool people. How does that feel?
Um, um, I am glad to have been an asset. And Dave, he's an amazing musician, a top shelf guy. He's a good man. And I used to watch him play in his band Scream, and like he's just like this blur of hair and hands. Like that's not human what he's doing. I think I saw him the first time playing like when he was like 16 or something. And like Ian and I just kind of stood there like that's whoa. I've seen Nirvana and Foo Fighters. I mean, I've seen different incarnations of the man, and seen Josh play, and that someone of note says something nice about what you do is great. But to credit Black Flag, I was one of many people in that band. And in my opinion, the really good singers are the three before me. Like if you said to me, pick out a good Black Flag song, I could pick out a bunch of them. I wouldn't be singing on any of them. I like all the early stuff with Keith and Dez and Ron. And so when someone says, "Hey, Black Flag, cool," I think, well, thank you, but I think Greg Ginn, Chuck Tukowski, Robo, Dez, Ron, Keith. I don't think me. I think they're saying, or maybe like my little finger or something, a little bit me, but I'm a little ingredient in a big pot, basically being stirred around. And so it's, I'd rather be told something nice than, hey, get out of here, right? I'd rather get a pat on the back than a kick in the neck. But I don't, think to myself, hey, man. But it's pretty cool when someone that you like says something nice about what you do. Like some people whose music I have kind of awesome respect for, and people I've awesome respect for have said to me, "Hey, um, one of your books really got me through a tough time," or "Hey, I've always liked your records." And I won't name names because it's a bit much, but that has happened a few times in my life to where I never saw that coming, never would have seen that coming. And so it's cool. I'm sure it happens to Ian Mackay kind of sort of every day. He was one of those people that, a lot of us can point to and go like, that guy, he's in my lexicon of heroes and people who've been an asset. And as I've been doing since I was like 6 years old, I lean on music really hard. I'm kind of a depressed guy by nature, kind of gloomy all the time. So I go to the gym and I listen to music. Those are my two, keep stress and depression at bay. And to this day, fitness, good diet, and music, music, music. And so there's bands and records I've leaned on so hard, I'm afraid they'll yell I lean on them so hard. And the fun thing is to meet those bands, like The Damned. Are you kidding? I can't say thank you to a band enough. Iggy, David Bowie, people like that. Black Sabbath, these serious main ingredients in my life, the MC5, and, Brother Wayne Kramer sadly passed away recently. To be able to meet some of these bands and say thank you, or like, oh, no way, stuff like that. That's happened a few times. On festivals, you'll be with some band and, you're allowed to go into their dressing room and shake the hand and get shuffled out. And that has been really gratifying because, as I told you before, I started as a fan and I remain a fan. And so getting a compliment from someone you admire is cool, but getting to meet that person and say, "Oh, you're great," I've never gotten over it. And and those are names I will drop. Get to meet the Ramones, I did it. And David Bowie, met David Bowie, shook the hand. I don't know the guy, but I got to meet him, and he was very kind. Suffered my fanboy questions, and that kind of thing. It just brings the music home. When I lived in Los Angeles, I saw people I recognized from music and film pretty often because I lived in Hollywood, and you go out to eat dinner somewhere and like there's that guy and that guy and that gal, and they're on that show or that movie, and I leave them alone. I'm deathly afraid of walking up to someone knowing I'm pretty crazy. It's like, hey, I really like your band, and having that person say, get away from me, which would kind of ruin my fanboy listening experience. And so, not having suffered that yet, I tread very carefully around people I recognize. Sometimes I'm introduced properly, but rarely have I ever walked up and said, excuse me, I stick my hand out. I've done it a couple of times, just because, why not? And luckily it worked out. It worked out. I did that to Ike Turner once, at a film premiere. Like, there's Ike Turner, and no one's, you look him up. And I was standing around with someone. I go, that's Ike Turner. Like, no way. Like, of Ike and Tina Turner. And I said,
Yeah.
let's go talk to Ike Turner. He's like, hell no, I'm not going over there. He's like terrifying. It's like a human barracuda. And I'm like, screw it. Hold my drink. I'm going over there. And I just walked over. I said, hey, Mr. Turner, with the Delta Cats, you wrote Rocket 88. You invented rock and roll, which is kind of a big American myth. And he went, so I basically gave him a huge compliment. I said, you invented rock and roll. And he said, yes, I did. Very good to meet you, young man. He shook my hand. I said, I'm out of here, before it all went bad. And so that's one of the only times I've ever just like walked over there because, I don't want to be told, take a hike. I'd rather just listen to
That
the
is,
records.
well, I mean, look, you're a very humble, funny, clever, philosophical guy. So you have that where we're saying you've inspired tons of people. You do people ask you to do something and you just do it because you know you can. But for those who are trying to get onto the scene or trying to become a spoken word artist, to try and do what they love, what tips would you give them?
Um, well, what helped me get through my life in the entertainment business, if you want to call it that, was 5 years in Black Flag, where I thought I knew what hard work was. My parents are both they were both really hardworking, like hyper achievement oriented people. And I got some of that from them. So I thought when I joined Black Flag, I'm a hardworking guy. I'm in this boring job, 60 hours a week. Then I joined Black Flag. And it was like joining the Marine Corps as far as learning curve. It was basically sheer vertical. Greg Ginn and Chuck Tukowski, you could not exhaust them. They were unstoppable. They were like Terminators. Like, no sleep, go play. Don't feel good, go play. Like, I would watch Greg play 2 sets, walk off stage, having one of those summer colds that are horrible, vomit into a trash can, walk right back out for the encore. You're like, Greg, sit down. We got 2 guitars. Des is playing guitar. We can do this without you. Like, nope. And so I learned what hard work was by being in Black Flag. And if it doesn't break you, It'll make you kind of unstoppable. And so I hung in there as best I could. I could never equal their work ethic, but I could cling tenaciously. And so I learned from them to never give up and to, even if it hurts, you keep going. And if there's something you really want to do, you have to learn a new definition of wanting. Like you've got to want it more than your next breath, or at least as much, to the point of being in a state of constant desperation, to where you're brave out of fear of failure, to where you're fearless. Not because I'm not a brave guy, but I became fearless because like, go. And like, it just becomes this implicit directive. And so I learned that in Black Flag, and it's basically informed everything else I've ever done. And so if you want to be in a band or like stand-up comedy, which I would never venture into, it looks terrifying. But, you know, being on stage on your own with a microphone or whatever, you just have to really want it. And you'll see how much you want it when the rubber meets the road. Like where you're in the garage and the songs aren't happening for days at a time. And you want to throttle the drummer, a common ailment. You have to want it more than your next meal. And you have to be ready to miss the next meal, to do anything it takes. Not murder, you don't hurt anybody. You just learn to go without if that's what it takes. Like, I'm going to pay the rent, and then I'm going to eat beans and rice, but I'm going to buy guitar strings or a laptop so I can write my book, or notebook papers. Like, I'm going to get it done. I'll write it in my own blood. You have to be in a mindset of, I will not be stopped. And fun? I don't know about that. In that, making music for me was never all that fun. It was like bloodletting. It was in me. It had to come out. Playing was physically painful because I'm sure you can find some videos. I went for it as hard as I could, to the point of I walk all crooked now because I've wrecked my back and broken bones, lots of concussions, got kicked in the head, lots of stitches, knocked out, passed out, because I wanted to do it. And so determination, discipline, focus, tenacity, and as much as you can. And if you take anything away from you and me hanging out, gratitude, man. You must be grateful in your sleep, in the shower, the next drink of water, the next meal, the next day, as an old pal of mine named Kay used to say, that you don't wake up upside down at the bottom of a river. Gratitude, grateful for your audience, grateful for the opportunity to be in front of people, grateful, grateful, grateful. Looks like the room you're in doesn't look like the roof is leaking. That's great, man. And so the older I get, the more aware I become how much gratitude is kind of the fuel that keeps it going. I have an audience. I'm obsessed with them. I fear failing them. I literally work 7 days a week. I live alone. I work alone. I go to the gym. I go to the supermarket. I pick up my mail, and I come back to the desk. That's kind of my life. And then I listen to music at night. And so my 9 to 5 is making things I'm hoping someone might like a radio show where you get to the end of the 2 hours and it didn't suck. Or a book that you can get through and go, okay, well, it wasn't horrible. I'll keep checking them out. And believe it or not, it's not about money. It's not about fame. It's about doing something. And the fact that someone shows up, I'm probably one of the most grateful people you'll ever meet. I am astonished that anyone shows up. I can't believe it. And I'm grateful. And if you can remain grateful, even for, like, you get one gig with your band and then the tour folds up and goes home. Hey, hold on to that. And so gratitude has been a real instructive fuel for me to get through times where, COVID was really rough. Like, tours would cancel, and we'll try again next year. Not next month. We'll try again in a year. I'm not 22 anymore. I'm looking at, maybe tapping out on all of this. Like another year? Whoa. But hopefully there'll be an audience waiting. And so gratitude will get you through times of no food. Like, I'll never forget this. I was in Bristol, Tennessee with Bill Stevenson, Black Flag, 1984, December. We had a night off, and we had just played in Knoxville, Tennessee. We were going to drive like hellions overnight up to Washington, D.C. to go see some band called Motorhead play, I think, the Ontario Theater. And their management got a hold of our people and said, how about Black Flag be the surprise opening band? Are you kidding me, man? We're driving like on our rear wheels to get to DC, to get on that stage and open for Motorhead. Come on. One of our vans, the engine basically melts down. And just it just goes away in Bristol, which is on the way to Washington, D.C. We pull it into a gas station, and the guy basically says, your van is a heap of metal. It'll never move again. And we're watching, now the band is going to go on in 2 hours. Like, the night is over. We're going to spend it in the snow with no money, really. Hopefully getting a cup of coffee at a Dunkin' Donuts or a 7-Eleven. And I remember standing with Bill, drummer of the Descendants, in the snow, looking at a 7-Eleven. And I said, man, no Motorhead, no van. We're screwed, man. And we looked at the guy behind the counter of the 7-Eleven in his orange smock, ringing people out. And I'm not putting the guy down. It's a good job. And he pointed at the guy and he said, but at least we're free. I'm like, whoa, Bill. Okay, Plato. Whoa, that's deep, man. And he kind of summed up the whole thing, like in a single sentence. Like, yeah, we're out here, as David Lee Roth used to say, on the sea of consequence. Just kind of, riding the wild. And some days the van's going to burn up. Hey, man, at least you're not punching a time clock. And so there's that. And that is stuck in my mind. I've never forgotten that. And that's, again, but it goes back to gratitude. And that for me has been, I'm not an ambitious person. I have resolve instead of ambition. Ambition makes you like step on someone's hands as you're trying to climb over them. I don't want to do that. I just want to be the person who doesn't quit. Like, hey, Henry, you're bleeding out of your mouth. Yeah, but I'm going to get it done. You lost an arm. Yeah, I got another one. And so that's resolve. But it's gratitude that fuels it, that I get to do it. And so that has served me well. Because, at this point, I'm an old ass man. I am old. And I still get to do stuff. And what else can I be but grateful?
That is a great way to live, to just be grateful to be alive. I love that. And now before you go, I want to actually ask a bit of a question for the fun of it. You are a massive record collector.
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, are there any new records or records that aren't so well known that you'd like to recommend to people?
Yeah. What I would recommend is, and I'm not, this isn't a shameless plug, but to answer your question clearly, henryrollins.com, my website, you can pull down the radio show notes of all my radio broadcasts and literally see all the songs I'm playing, or go to kcrw.com and hear the show for free. And you can hear what is interesting to me. And so I buy new records all the time. I mean, I have at least 5 or 6 legs in the past because I'm old. And so bands like The Damned and The Ruts and the UK subs and all of that is relevant to me. But a bunch of obstreperous 19-year-olds making music sounds good to me. And so I'm buying new records from Bandcamp and from record labels that I know and don't know. Discord puts out great records every year. I'm putting those on the radio show. Ipecac, Mike Patton's label, he's doing great work. Of course, the OCs, John Dwyer of the OCs, he's got Castle Face, great label. In the Red Records, great label. All those people are in my universe. They're sending me tracks. I'm listening. I'm putting stuff on. People write me like, dude, I know your radio show. I think you'd like this band. Go to a Bandcamp address. I listen. I like. I buy, and I put them on the radio show. And so, I play a lot of really loud, obnoxious punk rock, which always works for me. There's a label called Goner, I believe, out of Memphis, Tennessee. Great label. Great punk labels out of Germany, Spain, Italy. Goodbye Boozy, great punk label out of Italy. They put out radical records. Total Punk, great punk label. But I make my listeners listen to a lot of John Coltrane, and I would beg you, Logan, to keep your ears open as a listener. I mean, I was raised as a listener by my mom, who had, in my opinion, pitch perfect taste in music. Like, I don't have every record she had. I don't need 14 Barbra Streisand records, but Barbra Streisand can really sing. So I was raised on Bartok, Stravinsky, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Bob Dylan, Jimi Hendrix, show tunes, Glenn Campbell, Dionne Warwick, Burt Bacharach, my mom's music. As a little kid, she put records on. And then, Beatles, The Doors, I kind of got my own thing going. And so I'm the guy who goes to the record store. I'm on eBay, Discogs, every day, obsessively. Bandcamp. People write me making suggestions. I will listen to any suggestion sent to me. Bandcamp makes it easy. Click, listen, like, don't like, yay, nay. And so I listen to it. I'm playing a ton of bands from Australia right now. Great band called The Chimers, TV Repairman, 1-800-Mikey. If you listen to my radio show, sometimes it seems like it's from Australia. There's so many Australian bands, but in Australia, every third building's a record store or a venue, and every other person's in a band. And so they bring it on themselves, being so good all the time. I must buy those records and play them. And I was just there a few months ago, and I came back, as usual, with an extra suitcase of records. And so I'm always looking. I'm very open-minded. I listen to a lot of noise music, like avant music, avant jazz music, a lot of, kind of crazy cut and paste collage laptop music. It's all interesting to me. Not so much on the country western music. It's just a lot of talent in that genre. It's just never been my wheelhouse. But I'm always up for hearing whatever's happening. I think what happens in 100 years, you'll be old like me. Don't fall into the trap of claiming it was better when I was young and these young people don't know what they're doing. Because now you sound like Frank Sinatra talking about the Jimi Hendrix experience. And Frank Sinatra, you should hear. The guy could really sing. But about the Jimi Hendrix experience, he was wrong. He was closed-minded. He became a man of his time. May that never happen to you, because you'll miss out on a lot of fun where you can be a creaky old guy like me and still go to the gig. And I go to shows all the time. And I stand in the back so no one runs into me and breaks my hip. But I like it, and I'm still open to it, because I've always been open to it. I always want to go to the gig. Like going to the show, I mean, that's what you do, man. You go to the show. As soon as I could, I did. And even now, I do. And luckily, I live in a city that everyone seems to come through here. And so, hey, man, may it never end. And so I buy records. It's early where I am. I haven't bought any records yet today, but give me some time. I'll find something.
Wow. I will definitely make sure to check out your website and check out all those tracks and start to have a listen. Henry, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. It's
Thank you, man.
been great discussing your career, and thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. It's cool to meet you. And let me say, I admire and respect you for what you're doing. Like, you're obviously curious, you're moving with it. And best of luck as you go forward with all of this. Fantastic work you're doing.
Thank you so much, Henry. Have a lovely day.
Okay, bye.
you enjoyed listening to this episode of Logan Sounds Off. You can follow me on X, Facebook and Instagram at Logan Sounds Off. And don't forget to subscribe and not miss any more cool episodes. Bye guys!